Okay, well, I would first of all want to thank everybody for joining us today. We're sorry with like when he said with all the technical difficulties. We love it when it works great, right? But anyways, I wanted to thank you all for joining us. Definitely thank Dr. Riley for joining us. Really appreciate him taking his time. Now, I know several of you were at the event last month, and several actually that was not able was there had emailed me and asked me if we had recorded it. The answer is yes, we did actually have a videographer record it, but we have not received the recording back yet. The last thing we heard from him last week was he was finishing it up, and we would hopefully be having it sometime here very soon. So it'll come out here in your email to you as soon as we get it. So thanks again, Dr. Riley, for taking your time. I'm going to go ahead and turn it up. Before I do this, I just wanted to really quickly introduce our team to everybody here. So I know Alice, we're not going to be able to see her. So,
but you can hear me. I'm here.
So that's Alice Harlow. And then we have Tisha. Tisha, you want to say hey real quick?
Hello, thanks for being here.
Okay, and then we have Nitai.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to see all of you.
And then Ray.
Hi, everyone. So glad that you're here.
All right. And then, of course, last but not least, but my better half, Joe. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and we're going to start the process here.
Yeah, so we wanted to thank Dr. Riley. So just to recap, I know probably most everybody on the call was at the live event and got to see Dr. Riley live. But I know there's a few that are just clients that maybe couldn't make the event but wanted to get on and join us today. So when Suzanne and I had scheduled Dr. Riley to come to our live event, we were thinking what are the things that we can do to help you, like just beyond having a great speaker like Dr. Riley come and explain the 4 phases of retirement. How can we help you take action on those things and help you if you get stuck along the way? And so that's when we reached out to him, and he agreed to do these out of the kindness of his heart. So we have this scheduled, and then we have another one scheduled for next month. Basically just an opportunity for us to, we're going to make this as informal as possible, just to ask questions and, hopefully get some better insight on, what you can be doing, or, any place you're stuck, that type of thing. So Dr. Riley, we thank you for agreeing to do this.
It's my pleasure, Joe. And I want to commend you and Suzanne and your team for what you're doing here. The truth is that, first of all, most advisors are not discussing this topic, the psychological changes and challenges that almost always accompany retirement. Most advisors are focusing on their little piece of the puzzle, as it were, in helping people plan for retirement. And this other aspect of it has been virtually completely overlooked. So I commend Joe and Suzanne for what they're doing. This is a new development in the industry. And so I hope to learn as much from our time together today as perhaps you will. And I look forward to our second session as well. So as Joe has said, it's one thing to attend a seminar and perhaps even to take away the little worksheets that we provided and spend some time in doing it. But I think these follow-up discussions can be very helpful. I hope that they will be. And I look forward to responding to any questions that you might have. And I have some questions from my end as well that I'd like to throw out to those folks who are with us today. So let's start off with questions from you, and let's see where we go from there.
Great. That's good. So if anybody has any questions while we're talking, anything pops into your head, or you didn't have a chance to email us ahead of time, just go ahead and put those in the chat right now, or the Q&A, and we'll get to those. So my first thing is I wanted to just have you quickly, a 1-minute summary of the 4 phases just for anybody that just needs a quick refresher.
Sure. Sure. The four phases, again, this is the result of dozens and dozens, hundreds of interviews with retirees over the last several years. And it's really a framework that I've put together based on the responses that many people have found helpful in kind of understanding some of the things that happen to them in retirement. Phase one, I describe as the vacation phase. It's the shortest of the phases generally. It's just like a vacation. It's the sort of thing where you have no set routine. You can get up in the morning when you want, go to bed when you want. It's frankly most people's view of an ideal retirement. And it can be a wonderful time of your life for a short period of time. It usually doesn't last more than a year or so, and you are likely going to spend close to 30 years, close to 1/3 of your life in retirement. So enjoy phase one, the vacation phase, because it doesn't last for long. What happens after about a year or so is we frankly kind of get bored. We miss a routine that we've become used to. I believe that people are genetically wired to require a routine. And when you've retired and in this vacation phase, you haven't got one. Phase two is where we suffer significant losses, 5 significant losses that I outlined. And it throws many people into depression, decline, both physical and mental. And there has been a spike in divorces in phase two as a direct result of retirement. It's a difficult time. And many people suffer. The highest rate of suicide in North America today is men over 75. It's a shocking statistic, but it's the result of some of the losses that we experience in phase two. At some point, thankfully, most people say, hey, I don't want to go on like this. I can't spend the rest of my life, perhaps 30 years of my life, feeling like this. I've got to do something. That's good. That's when we move into phase three, when we try to do some things that are going to make us want to get up in the morning again. The sorts of things that will provide a sense of meaning for us. And so people try different approaches, different initiatives. And the first initiative is not usually the one that works and carries them into phase four. Most people kind of beat their head against a wall. It feels like that anyway for a while. But luckily, about half of retirees, perhaps slightly more, 60% of retirees, finally do break through to phase four. Phase four is when we reinvent ourselves, when we rewire ourselves. We take some of the things that we love to do and do really well, and we apply them in a new situation, perhaps a volunteer situation, perhaps not, but we reapply those things that we love to do and that we're good at. Phase four people are the happiest people I have ever met. They can't wait for the sun to rise so that they can get up and get at it again. And my hope is that more and more people can reach and break through and reach to phase four. Those are the four phases in a nutshell, and we're hoping that we can help you get there.
That's really good. That's good. That's a good refresher for everybody. So that kind of leads me into like another question we had was like, how long like time frame? And I know it's probably different for everybody, right? But like you mentioned like about it maybe a year in the vacation phase, could be longer for some, could be shorter for some.
Yeah.
And then like, how long do you see people spending in these other phases to get to phase four?
Well, Joe, it does vary. It varies so terribly. I mean, I can really only use my experience perhaps as a guidepost, recognizing that people do it differently. I spent about 2 years in phase one, and I enjoyed all of the aspects of it tremendously until finally I didn't, and it got boring, and you can only play so much golf or do so much gardening or whatever it might be. There has to be more to life than that. And what I have discovered is that, the underlying feature that allows people to break through to phase four is people who consciously provide service to others. That's the key to breaking through to phase 4. Anyway, back to the time frame. It for me was about 2 years in phase 1. Frankly, it's kind of a blur for me as far as phase 2. I have a kind of a vague sense that it was a couple of years. It was something I kind of wasn't keeping track at the time, but I was aware of just negative feelings and just kind of wondering what was going on. It did take me, and I did document, it took me about 7 years in phase 3. I tried a dozen different things, most of which were spectacular failures, until finally I kind of got it and went back to the things that I love to do, things I do pretty well, which basically is writing and teaching. And that's what has propelled me through to phase 4 and doing some of the work that I'm doing now to try to help others get there as well.
Right. That's good. That's good. We appreciate you telling your story. So like everybody that's on this call that heard you speak a month ago and or have maybe trying some things, like, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Dr. Riley said it took him 7 years. So if you haven't figured it out in a month, it's not the end of the world. So,
It's okay. It's okay.
yes. That's
Key
good.
is to keep trying. The key is to keep trying, keep trying. Sooner or later, the odds are really good that if you just keep at it, you'll find that combination of things that you love to do, know that you do really well, and that provide service to others. It's a different equation for everybody, but those are the components of a successful equation in my experience.
That's good. So Suzanne had a short story about somebody that came to the event talking about just along the lines of somebody stuck in phase 2. So Suzanne, you want to speak to that?
Well, I received a lot of good feedback. So I'm so happy that ones are taking this to heart. But one thing I had heard from one of my clients was they thought that they were by themselves. And what it kind of boiled down to was when you're going into phase 2 and you're dealing with the loss of your identity, or you are always identified by your career, your profession.
Yeah. And
now you kind of feel like a nobody, which that sounds harsh, but it seems like that's the reality.
It is.
And so one of my clients that said to me is, oh my word, I walked in that room and there's all these people just like us. And it was really refreshing for me because it kind of helped me know this is kind of what that we were doing the right thing. But needless to say, how the client explained to me was we were really going through the depression side. And listening to this really let us know that this is normal, and that and it really did give me hope. So when they walked out, they felt like that they had hope to try to now go out and try to figure out what their next step was.
Yeah, that's a great story. Well, Suzanne, your point is really well taken, and I've heard it over and over again that people think that they're alone in this, and I guess in some ways they are. But the point that I try to make in the workshops and whenever I have the opportunity is that remember that there are 10,000 other North Americans retiring every day. So they're going through the same kinds of things that you are. I know you can feel like you're alone. And so the opportunity that you folks presented a month or so ago, where well over 100 people who were kind of in the same boat together could see that they were not alone. That's a great story. Thanks.
Yeah, that is. So when you were talking about like the phase 1 and, people, going through that, it reminded me. So I follow some different Facebook groups where retirees are in it and they talk and everything. And this guy he made this post, like what his day was like that day, or talking about how he had such a great day. And he talked about playing, starting his day out, playing an hour and a half of pickleball in the morning, having a great lunch, doing some other things. And I mean, it sounds great, right? Because he's in the vacation phase. He's,
Sounds
he's
like-
having a great time. But
Sounds
like you said, that stuff after a while, it's like, well, there's got to be more to this, right?
Yeah.
It's not just
Yeah.
not just hours of pickleball a day. So
Hey, listen, people are lucky to be able to play pickleball through all four phases. It's just a matter, I think, of the amount of time. And as you say,
right.
pickleball's great, but there's a whole lot. There has to be way more to retirement than that. And part of it has to be ways that you can find to yourself being of service to others in some way or another. Maybe you could become a pickleball coach, or maybe you just become a volunteer for the local pickleball organization and you help to organize court times or tournaments.
Right.
That's getting to be more like it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And that kind of leads me to like the next thing. It's like, so like that's really good how you just like ran off a few ideas, right, for somebody right there, in that thing, because maybe somebody was at the event last month and they're like, they kind of don't, maybe they're not great at brainstorming, right? Even though you gave some great tools for it. And so like, if somebody was there last month and they're like, yeah, this was great stuff, but it's like, it's now a month plus later and I haven't done anything. Like, what would be your like one piece of advice, one action item that they should do like this week to get moving on it?
Yeah, we have certainly, you've got to get started. And I would come back and say, what are the things that you love to do? What are the things that you know you do very well? And how could you apply those things perhaps in a different way than you applied them when you were during your working career? Is there a need for those things that you love to do and do very well? And the answer is, be assured that there is a need out there in your community. There are so many organizations looking for assistance where you could use your experience and expertise. It's not that, volunteering doesn't have to be stuffing envelopes. It can be at a much higher level than that. And you can take some of your experience and expertise, quite likely, and you can apply that in a whole range of areas. So I would say contact a nonprofit in your community. Have a look in the want ads section of your local newspaper. You're going to find opportunities there that will resonate with you, and people would love to have assistance. And maybe they're prepared to pay a small stipend, maybe they're not. But if you're fortunate enough where you're relatively stable financially, it kind of gives you the freedom to really custom design the kind of involvement that you would like to have. And I would say just rest assured that there is far more demand out there for your services and your skills and expertise than there is supply. So you are going to have an opportunity, but you do have to take the initiative for sure. That's part of the trial and error part of it. You have to take the initiative. Likely no one's going to come knocking on your door with a great idea for you. No, that's up to you. And you've got to take responsibility for that.
Yeah, that's good. Suzanne, you had a quick story about someone you ran into, I think it was a week or so after the event that was there. You want to share that?
I do, because I was so excited when I was talking to the client. He said, it was funny because I ran into him and it's like the first words out of his mouth is, I just signed up today to be a volunteer at the Christian Athletic Association.
Great.
And it was so interesting because, I just kind of ran into him and he was so pumped up he's like, I literally just got off the phone with him this morning, signing up to be a volunteer. And about a week later, I ran into somebody else and it was so interesting because they had told me the same thing of I'm being a volunteer at the Christian Athletic Association. So personally, I don't know what the Christian Athletic Association is, but apparently they need volunteers. So
It sounds like they do.
that's
Yeah.
an example of something, if that's something you're, that might interest you, but that was a very, very rewarding, like they were very excited because he had been stuck in phase 2.
Mm,
He was trying to figure out what his next step was.
mhm.
And he had signed up for that and was just so excited to start that process. So
Great.
once
Great.
again, thank you, Dr. Riley, because you're the one that kind of pushed him into that. So we appreciate that.
I love those stories. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to first, this really wasn't in our notes or what we plan on saying, but it just kind of leads down this road. Like, so Suzanne and I thinking about the next event that we're going to do and everything. And it's like, how can we build on what we're already doing, what we're already talking about? And we were kind of thinking like, what if we brought in like a whole lineup of different volunteer opportunities, like a speaker for each one that maybe gets up and talks for like 2 minutes about
Yeah.
what it would be like or what that entails, and maybe run through 10 or so of those, and just to kind of like for people to hear like what's out there, and maybe something resonates with them that they didn't think about. So
Yeah. Joe, that's a great idea, and in fact, there's an organization in Springfield, Missouri called Give 5, and that's exactly what they do. Although they do it perhaps slightly differently, they line up volunteer organizations in the community, and then they actually take people on a bus to 5 or 6 of those during a day. And they actually visit the sites of these organizations that need help, and people kind of get a sense of feel of what it might look like to be there. And the same sort of thing, they indicate what sort of assistance they need. And there's a very high percentage of folks who, having seen some of the options available, make a choice. So your idea, I think, is a great idea, and I'm sure that it would be very helpful to not only attendees but also to the volunteer organizations who really don't always have a forum where they can express their needs. And so, by providing it, great idea.
okay, good. So we'll keep that in the hopper. I don't know, how that would shake out, but we'll see.
Sure.
So you mentioned, just to shift gears, you mentioned that you had some maybe questions for our clients on the call. So I wanted to see what you were thinking.
Oh, well, I've got a whole bunch of ideas here that I'd like to throw out. What I'm really particularly interested in, and I appreciate, Suzanne, you having mentioned a couple of people in phase 2. I have found, generally speaking, in my interviews, that people are not as comfortable talking about their phase 2 experience as they are about their other phases experience. And so I would be delighted if anyone on our call today here was inclined or felt comfortable just sharing a little bit about some of their phase 2 challenges. I'd love to hear that. That's an area of my research that is not as robust as some of the others are.
That's good. I'm sure that's tough to talk about, right?
It is. It is.
Yes. Yeah. Somebody that's there, it's
Certainly can be. Yeah.
So we actually had a question here. Richard, he just said he's just finishing his book on finding your purpose when you retire. So it's along the same lines. Good stuff.
Yep.
And he said it's a guided journal. And retiring involves 3 dimensions: emotional, psychological, and spiritual. And he wanted to see if you agreed with that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've kind of combined all of those under the term, some of the psychological challenges, but certainly you're right. It goes well beyond that. It goes to the spiritual, it goes to the social, it goes to the physical, it goes to the mental. And I've just kind of combined them all under the term psychological, but I would agree wholeheartedly. Absolutely the truth. Yeah.
Yeah. So back to your question about people talking about being in phase 2 and wanting to, if we heard more about what that was like or what they're experiencing, there's a possibility we could help them, in that,
Mhm.
because, we're all like the people that came into the room and saw 100+ other people and they thought I was all alone in this. So I think that it's easy to, when you're the person that's in that phase 2, it's maybe a little bit more difficult to identify it, but
Mhm.
you can identify if you're married to somebody, right? That's like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what advice would you give to someone that maybe you're married to somebody that you feel like is in phase 2? And how could you help them?
Yeah. Well, I think you could help them by really doing one of the little exercises that we did during our workshop, and that would be to ask them to just write down, make note of, think about what are some of the things that they love to do, what are some of the things that they believe that they do really well. Again, there is a requirement for introspection in all of this, and we need to do some deep digging, and maybe by encouraging a spouse who might be reluctant to do so to actually kind of involve themselves in that little exercise. To me, that could be a helpful kind of thing, and perhaps both spouses, assuming that they're both retired, sit down and do it together, and then kind of compare their notes, and then talk about ways in which in their community they might be able to apply some of those skills and some of the things that they love to do. So I think people in phase 2 need encouragement, and that's kind of the next kind of workshop that I'm working on developing. It would be one that would be a little lengthier than our introductory one that we presented there a while ago. And it really focuses more on, as I say, some of the introspection required that we didn't really have a lot of time to do in our first session. But as I say, I'm developing one that is really intended to be of help to particularly people in phase 2, to help them to kind of look for opportunities that they could apply perhaps in phase 3, the trial and error phase. But to answer your question, Joe, a spouse can be helpful in just encouraging the person who they feel is stuck to just think about some of the things that they love to do, know they do well, and probably have led to success in earlier times of their life. We forget about these things. We don't want to brag about it, but in fact, I think it's an important tool. It's an important piece of introspection to help people move forward.
Right. I like that. I like the point, do it together with them. So it's not really shining the spotlight on them to do it. Like they need to fix themselves. It's, hey, let's do this together. It's kind of like how Suzanne gets me to clean the garage.
Is that the way
It's
it is?
like, hey, I'm going to go out here and clean up this, whatever. You want to come out with me?
Yeah,
and then next thing I know, I've spent the afternoon cleaning the garage. So yeah, that's good.
Well, I've just I'm putting together right now a questionnaire that is designed for couples to kind of work on together. And it's kind of in the early stages of development, but it's a focus for me over the next several months that I'll be happy to share with you when I think it's cooked and ready to be presented.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love to hear that. So like for people in like our generation, like you see your parents and you think, well, they could really use this, right? And the exciting thing was for Suzanne and I, both of our parents were at the event. So that was exciting.
Yeah.
So they got to hear it firsthand. But maybe there's someone out there and it's like, you see your parents kind of stuck in phase 2 or having some issues with this. It's like, I think it can be hard coming from a kid, right? Trying to give them advice, because I know my dad never takes any of my advice. But do you have any helpful points along that line?
Well, it is. I appreciate that father-son and mother-daughter relationships can be tenuous and prickly on occasion. So I guess it really depends on the type of relationship that exists. But and I appreciate the resistance that can often come from a parent, to a suggestions from a son, like kind of, what do you know, sort of thing. But again, my intent is that by developing some of these questionnaires, these further tools, I guess you might be a term for them, that even to just kind of share those with a parent who you sense might be struggling, or a colleague, or another relative. I mean, one of the things that people who have been through the workshop say that they appreciate is that they find it relatively easy going forward to be able to sort of, I wouldn't say pigeonhole, but they can identify what phase some of their colleagues, some of their relatives might be in, some of their neighbors perhaps who are retired. And so it can be kind of a helpful tool just for that. So I want to take it to the next level where we can provide some more tools, again, for want of a better term, that might help to kind of jog people's memories or to kind of get them going down that road, because it does require some work on the part of the individual, and one can only do so much encouragement before it's seen as being intrusive and bothersome. And I appreciate that. So I'm hoping that, as I say, as we develop these, that they can kind of add to the discussions.
That's good. Yeah. So we don't see anybody jumping at the at your question to answer about being stuck in phase 2 or their experience with phase 2 now that they're moved on. So what we're going to do is we're going to send this video, this recording out to our clients and ask them, hey, help Dr. Riley with some case studies and stories, and see if we can get some response from our clients.
I do see a question, and I do see another question that came in.
Okay.
It just said, retiring is a major transition. Your old identity falls apart, a death experience. One day you will know who you are. The next day you haven't a clue. I refer to this as the wilderness, or wilderness experience.
Mm-hmm.
All of the grieving, ignore the helpful advice from friends who tell you to shake it off. Takes time to find the new way of finding a reason to get up in the morning. Some people sail through this, others need time. What are your thoughts on this?
100% agreement are my thoughts. I think that person is describing phase 2 with all of the losses, and then the 3 Ds that are added to it, the depression, decline, and divorce, that are not necessarily directly related to retirement, but more related to a time of life that tends to overlap with retirement. It's absolutely true. There's no doubt about it. It does take time, but it also takes work, because we can spend a lot of time feeling this way. And if we don't do anything about it, if we don't take the initiative to do something about it, then how are we going to get out of this and into the next phase? Mm-hmm. It requires introspection. It requires some thought and some consideration about the things that you still have to contribute. And retirees have huge amounts to contribute in so many different ways, but we need to think about it. I have a question. I've got another question that I'd like to hear responses from. People find this one a little bit easier, but I ask often during one-on-one interviews, I ask people, what are their biggest fears about retirement?
That's good.
That's good.
And another one that we like to ask is, what do you see as some of the biggest opportunities in front of you now that you've retired?
Mm-hmm.
Any takers on those biggest fears, biggest opportunities?
Yeah, and I think that's good. And I wanted to piggyback off the last one. Like, if somebody feels like they're like phase 3, they're trying some good things, they're getting some good results, maybe like on the brink of phase 4, right?
Yep.
And then you have a phase 2 situation, like one of the 3Ds happen, right?
Yeah.
So maybe there's a death, maybe a death of a spouse or something like that, or maybe
Yeah.
a major health crisis. Like
Yeah.
that can snap you back into phase 2. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. You may remember, folks may remember that we talked about 2 assumptions that we were making in the presentation. The first assumption was that people were enjoying relatively stable physical health, and they were also enjoying relatively stable financial health. And I do always try to make the point that I clearly understand, I've seen it, I've experienced it, that lacking either or both of those, retirement can look very different, and it can throw one's plans off. It can throw a kind of movement that you might feel that you're making through the phases. It can kind of bring that to a screeching halt. And I've seen people who really kind of have to almost start all over again after a period of time where there's grieving involved through these losses. It is not it's not necessarily a kind of a lockstep progress through these phases for sure. But again, people have told me over and over again that just having the framework has provided them a sense that they don't have to remain where they are, whichever phase that's in, forever.
Right.
That there is the possibility of moving forward and breaking through and achieving phase 4, but it requires some work. And people just often overlook that, or perhaps aren't prepared to put the work in.
Right.
It's necessary.
Yeah, that's good. Richard says one of the biggest fears is outliving your money. So
Yeah,
that's-
absolutely.
I know that anybody in the financial world,
Yeah.
like financial advisor world, they probably hear that a lot. So
Yeah. Well, that's I think partly the reason why there is such a heavy emphasis on the financial aspect of retirement preparation, because that certainly that is probably the overriding fear that retirees have. And that's why, in my view, it's critically important that they be getting good financial advice along the way, not just as they're approaching retirement, but ideally over a much longer period of time, to basically rule out that possibility. And it allows people to really blossom and to explore other areas. If you don't have that worry, I mean, what a blessing that is, to be able to explore other areas that will bring you enjoyment. Yeah.
right. And then Richard said, which Richard is our VIP today for answering questions. So thank you, Richard. He said that the dream or the opportunity that he sees in retirement is you kind of get to go do some things that maybe you always wanted to do, or maybe you have like a heart for, like maybe it's like you, like just for example, like coaching something, like or teaching, but you know your career was something else, right? You really couldn't make a living at what, you know, at a certain thing. So it's like in retirement, the doors are all open for you. So that's good.
Yeah, being an artist or a writer, you know, the odds of being able to make a living at it are pretty slim. But yes, in retirement, ideally, given reasonable physical health and financial health, these are just wonderful opportunities that are out there. And the other thing that I'd like to emphasize, if I can, is that people still are finding it difficult to come to grips with the fact, or to appreciate the fact, that the likelihood is that they are going to spend 1/3 of their life in retirement. People who I talk to seem to have a kind of a shorter time frame in their mind, and sometimes they're inclined not to undertake something, perhaps some training or something that would require, you know, perhaps a period of time to develop. Maybe playing the piano would be a good example. That, you know, sometimes people in retirement feel, well, you know, I don't have time to do that. And the truth is that they probably do. They've got lots of time to devote to this sort of thing, and they can look for opportunities once they have that mindset of the likelihood of a longer period of time in retirement than some do.
Yeah, that's good. So, moral of the story is you've got time. Take on the challenge, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Right. So, did
Do it.
anybody else on the call? If you have any questions, please put them in. We're going to be wrapping this up, but we're going to give you time to ask any other questions or answer any of Dr. Riley's questions. So, anything, Dr. Riley, anything you have to wrap up with?
No, I appreciate this opportunity and to just have this kind of conversation, to have some of the back and forth, and to reinforce some of the things that I hope can be helpful to people. What I might ask Joe for next time would be, well, first of all, if between now and our next session, people might be comfortable in giving some more thought or writing something down about their phase 2 experience, I would appreciate that. Really, for part of my research, that might be something in it for me. And then it might also be interesting and helpful if people have some questions that they want to submit to you folks in advance of our session next time. And then we can perhaps have a list, as we come out of the gate of things that people would like to have responses to. I'd value that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll definitely send out this recording as an email, and we'll ask a couple, we'll put your questions in the email also. So
Thanks.
People can, now that you put that carrot out there that they might be a case study in your next book, that would be great.
Yeah, that's right.
And if anybody hasn't read his book that we provided you at the event, please read it, because it'll really help you.
Yeah, and if anybody, if you weren't at the event and didn't get a copy of the book, we have extras. So just reach out to us and we'll mail you a copy of the book. So anybody watching this now or later. So
that's a great gesture. Thank you for doing that, folks. Again, it does kind of fill in some of the things that we may not have discussed during the presentation, and might provide a good background, as I say, in preparation for our next session too. So yeah. Great stuff. Absolutely. Thank you.
So our next Zoom is going to be July 26th, which is a Wednesday at noon. So noon on July 26th. We're looking forward to that. And then hopefully we'll be able to send this out and get some good feedback and some good answers to your questions from there. So Suzanne, do you have anything you want to wrap up with?
I just want to tell you all, thank you for joining. We're going to go ahead and leave the Zoom open for a couple minutes, because what we've been told is in the past, when we do our Zooms, we shut them down too quickly and people have a couple more questions. So we'll leave it open for a couple more minutes, but I do want to thank everybody for joining. Definitely thank you to Dr. Riley Moynes for taking his time out to help us, help you, to where we're all benefiting from this. So we appreciate you taking your time. If you need anything, feel free to give us a call.
So thank you. So like Suzanne, for the next couple of minutes, are we just supposed to make some chit chat here, or like, what are we doing?
Well, have you ever seen like the people that make the videos or movies and you see like all the blurbs, like,
the blooper reel?
The blooper reel. That's what it's called, the blooper reel. So this would be our blooper reel.
The outtakes.
So, Dr. Riley, do you have any events coming up in the U.S. here this summer? Or?
Yes, I do actually. Have a couple of things that we're working on. Been invited down to speak to a group in Dallas. We're still working on some dates for that one, and that's the first one that comes to mind. Also going to be speaking at the National Association of Retirement Coaches, which is in early September in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I'm looking forward to that one as well.
Great.
Oh, interesting. I don't see any questions coming in. It looks like the attendees are starting to drop off. So we're probably safe.
Apparently they didn't like our chit chat. So that's fine.
We'll sign
No, that's
off.
great. So yeah,
Okay, folks.
we really appreciate you and the work you're doing. So we want to support you in any way we can.
Vice versa. I appreciate your efforts as well, folks. Nice to chat again, and we'll see you again in July.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. See
Bye-bye.
you, everybody.